Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey health junkies, it's Dr. Jannine Krause here, and on today's episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Michael Biamonte. He has spent more than 30 years treating complex digestive disorders, and he's the founder of the Biamonte Center for Clinical Nutrition. He's authored the book, The Candida Chronicles, and later on, hopefully this year or next, he's going to have a new book coming out to follow that up. Now, he has an interesting perspective when it comes to Cyclospora, that outbreak that's been wreaking havoc this summer. And he has some really interesting ideas in terms of the misconceptions on how folks are thinking this should be treated. Now, different types of herbal remedies for parasites like wormwood, black walnut, things of this nature aren't quite helping this. And he's going to talk about why nano curcumin seems to be effective, in addition to looking at nano silver, nano copper, and a host of other things. Plus, he's going to blow your mind about Candida and how there's a little bit of a connection to overgrowth of Candida that can happen when someone is treated with Bactrim, which is a type of antibiotic that's being used to treat Cyclospora. Now, while Bactrim has been effective, I must mention that it's a sulfamed, and that can be really hard for a lot of folks, and a lot of folks have allergies to it. So there's that factor, and there's a factor of how heavy-hitting antibiotics are on our digestive systems and how easily yeast or Candida can overgrow and wreak havoc. So Michael Biamonte dives into all kinds of stuff here in this podcast. It's quite fascinating, and I hope you enjoy this one. It's definitely a good listen. Let's introduce you to Michael Biamonte. Dr. Biamonte, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I am happy to know that you have some info for us about this whole Cyclospora thing, because I'll be honest, as a doc of almost 20 years, I haven't really dove into Cyclospora ever. Maybe I heard of it once in my life. So it's a new thing. It's something that, a lot of folks are talking about. And I am super curious how you dove into this.
Well, I got curious about it when I started to read the information online that it was starting to spread throughout the country. The latest I knew, it was in 33 states, I believe. And the symptoms appear to be pretty obvious. It's not something like you wonder, do you have? Because it seems initially it produces extreme diarrhea and vomiting in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So it's not the type of thing where you're getting a Q&A like, do I have it or not because I just had gas or something like this. It's not, doesn't work that way. It seems to be pretty obvious when you have it. And the thing about it, of course, what's interesting about it is it's the origin of it seems to be from around the countries around the equator, mostly South America, etc. It's always interesting in terms of how these things get spread. But the first data we had on it was that it was in certain produce, particularly lettuce from this company called Taylor. And the FDA did some testing and they confirmed their assumption that was true. But then Taylor brought in third-party testing, which came up negative, false. It was negative. So they got with the FDA and they told them, look, we think you're getting false positives on this. So then they went back to investigate it more, and then it was found that it was in chicken. So the latest that I heard is Tyson, particularly. Tyson chicken appears to be a big carrier of it, because when they tried to put the assumption forward that it wasn't in the lettuce, that's fine, but then you have to explain the thousands of cases. Well, then where did they get this from? Because it's not in doubt that people have it. And you can get a stool test for it. The incubation time on the parasite seems to be 2 to 10 days. So that means after you eat something that's contaminated with it, you have like somewhere between 2 to 10 days before it really manifests. What I find really interesting about it is that as a parasite, it's pretty unique. It has a very tough outer shell. And unfortunately, the tough outer shell that it has makes it impervious to the standard things that we would wash our produce or our food with.
Hmm.
So it doesn't really make any difference. The tests show it doesn't make any difference what you wash your produce or your food in. It's more the physical act of scrubbing
Hmm.
that helps reduce it from your food.
Okay.
Nothing has been found, not vinegar, like grapefruit seed extract.
None of
There's
those.
nothing, hydrogen peroxide. Nothing's been found to make
Okay.
any difference when you wash your food.
Okay.
So it's actually the friction of scrubbing that seems to loosen it and get it off to some degree.
Wow.
Now, now the thing that I find most fascinating about the parasite is that none of the traditional things kill it. So if you have the parasite and then you have ivermectin home or fenbendazole or any of the popular antiparasitics that are out now, it's not going to do anything. Not going
Wow.
to put a dent. Not going to put a dent in it. And to make matters worse, none of the traditional antiparasitics like black walnut, cloves, herbs, all our standard, the standard fare, do anything to it.
That's wild.
The only thing that will kill this are sulfa drugs. Bactrim is the popular one. So
Hmm.
most likely when you go, if you have this and you go to the ER or something, they're going to give you Bactrim or a version of Bactrim. It's usually those two-phase sulfa drugs, the
Mhm.
drugs that have two different drugs in the one drug, and there you go.
Yep.
I got very curious about this because some of these sulfa drugs, well, this is an antibiotic. So if we just talk in simple terms, it's an antibiotic, and when you take an antibiotic typically destroys things indiscriminately.
Uh-huh.
And when you take an antibiotic, it's going to also destroy your intestinal flora. Now, to argue about whether or not Bactrim is worse in terms of killing your flora as opposed to some other antibiotic, that's something people can debate about. But still, the fact of the matter is, there's a very strong chance it's going to affect your flora. So the scenario that I see happening is the person gets the parasite. They have the diarrhea and the vomiting. They go to their doctor. They get the antibiotic. They treat it. The vomiting and the diarrhea get much better. But now they start wiping out their flora. So now they start having gas, bloating. They start developing candida. So they're trading one set of symptoms for another. And the bad thing about this, which happens with Lyme patients all the time, is because the Lyme patient takes the antibiotic and it kills the the spirochete, and the Lyme backs off, they develop candida, and now they confuse having candida with having Lyme. And the same thing is going to happen with cyclosporus. People are going to start confusing having cyclosporus now with candida, and you're going to have this concept now of long COVID with long COVID.
Yeah.
You've got this idea that the COVID has remained in your system to some degree and it's still affecting you over time, which is not what long COVID is in reality. But you're going to have this with cyclosporus, as people are going to be treated for it. They're going to get better because their vomiting and diarrhea will cease, but they may develop candida if it wipes out their flora. So they're going to be confused and think they still have the parasite.
Yeah.
That's what we have to watch out for. And unfortunately, because mainstream medicine is not so good in understanding candida and the fact that the antibiotics kill bacteria indiscriminately and they're going to cause candida. Somebody's got to be getting this data out there that, hey, if you get treated for cyclosporus and your acute symptoms go away, but you still feel something's wrong, it's a side effect of the antibiotic now. That's what they have to be understand.
That's huge. And something that, as us alternative medicine providers do, we deal with this very often, very often. Now, you had mentioned something that I think a lot of people are going to be like, wait, Dr. Biamonte, tell us about this. COVID, long haul COVID isn't the
Well,
COVID
there's
virus.
no such thing. No, there's no such thing as long COVID. Not in that term. Why people use the term long COVID is because after COVID's over, the acute part of it is over, they still feel like something's wrong. So they call it long COVID. We've done studies where we've tested people for COVID when they were in the long COVID phase, so to speak, and they're negative. They're negative for COVID. They remain positive for the spike protein. So if you want to call it long spike, you could do that. But the sum effect that we've seen with long COVID is people who get COVID typically develop Candida. A study out of Germany and one out of there's a German study, a Spanish study, and I believe one from England, from Great Britain. No, I'm sorry, it's not Great Britain. It's Japan. The studies show that uh, COVID destroys bifidus bacteria in your colon. So of course this is going to cause candida. If you compromise your bifidus, you'll get candida. So as far as we can see, what long COVID is from testing bunches of people is when you have COVID for a reasonable period of time, it adversely affects your adrenal glands. So you end up with adrenal insufficiency. You end up with candida and you still have the spike protein doing whatever its mischief is going to be, which could be a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah.
To make a long story short, the spike protein screws up your telomeres. So we know a little bit with DNA and whatnot that DNA is basically governed by telomeres. You have a cell, and in the cell, there's the DNA who's like a big Buddha who sits on a big chair and he tells everybody in the cell what to do. Well, he's got this alarm clock sitting next to him that's called a telometer. And the alarm clock is going to go off when different gene expressions are supposed to happen based on your heredity. So in your family, if you're supposed to have arthritis in your 60s, that's when the telometer goes off and it's telling the DNA guy, well, now it's time for this person to have arthritis. Well, what happens with the spike protein is the spike protein comes in and screws up the telometer. So now it could go off at any second, essentially. That's to make a long story short what happens with the spike protein.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. Whoever developed it was pretty smart. We know that the history of COVID actually goes back into the 60s. COVID was around in the 60s and they were experimenting with it then.
Yeah.
So I hope I answered your long COVID question.
Perfectly. And brings me to another question that a lot of folks have right now is Cyclospora, is this some sort of manipulated parasite? Do we know any inklings?
Doesn't see that.
Okay.
It's been around for a long time. It's
Okay.
just that it somehow got into the food chain. How that's an argument. How it got in, conspiracy theories abound for everything nowadays, and rightfully so. Because there's a lot of crooked people and crooked things out there. But no, it doesn't seem like that was the issue.
Good
So
to know.
going back to the Cyclosporus,
Yeah.
people are always curious what they can do about it. Well, there is research done on mice which show that curcumin in a nano form will kill this organism. This is the only natural thing that I know of that there's any study on that will kill it. Now, the person listening to me right now is going to go into their cabinet and they're going to get their curcumin out. No, it's not. That's not going to do it. The standard curcumin that you buy has no effect on this. It doesn't have the potency. It doesn't have the molecular structure to get into the organism. It has to be curcumin in a nano form. So what nano basically means is it's really small. Nano-sized particles are really small. People have heard this term being kicked around in the last couple of years. Nano is just really, really small particles. Those particles are small enough to get into this parasite and kill it.
Okay.
So it has to be nano curcumin. Now, some research that I'm doing is indicating that nano silver and nano copper can kill it. And we have other data that shows that nano chitosan, if you combine nano chitosan with nano copper and nano silver, you wipe the thing out like crazy. You can get arrested for cyclosporus abuse. The problem is nobody makes chitosan in a nano form that you can buy publicly. You can only get it for research purposes. So don't go out to your store expecting to find this chitosan there. But you can find nano silver and you can find nano copper and you can find nano curcumin. You can find it online easily if you just do a search for it. Amazon has them. And probably in your local health food store, you can find nano curcumin. I'm not so sure if you can find the copper and the silver in your health food store. The silver that we use is Argentine 23,
Mm-hmm.
which is the best nano silver around. Nano, the Argentine 23 is such a small particle and such a low dose that it's almost impossible to get it to accumulate in your system. You could take it up to 4 times per hour if need be, 4 doses per hour, and indefinitely if you have to. Same thing with the copper that's made by the same company. the nano copper. So if somebody doesn't want to take the antibiotic, this is definitely an option. But as I said before, again, the Bactrim is kind of the model of the antibiotic that's used. There are various versions of it and generics of it, but that's basically what your options are: is taking the sulfa drug versus trying to find the nano curcumin, nano silver, nano copper. Other than that, I don't know of anything else that will kill it.
Wow. Well, I mean, one of the things I would think about too is we have a lot of people that have sulfa drug allergies. So then it becomes we got to find some of these things to work with to help folks, because what other option? I mean, I guess they would start trying different things just to see what would happen. What do we got there? Nano curcumin. There it
Nano
is. Nano
curcumin.
curcumin. Yep. Yep. That is the solution there. And in terms of that particular brand, I'm guessing they can
Hmm.
find that on your website as well.
No, 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 we don't sell it. They can find it on Amazon easily.
Okay.
Amazon or in their health food stores, probably. Any brand, as long as it says nano, technically should work if it's true.
Yeah,
If it's
that's the
truly nano curcumin, it should
that,
work.
that is the
There's
tricky
there's
part.
an issue. Yeah, there's an issue nowadays on Instagram and Facebook with companies selling fake stuff. You see these commercials about the black garlic and how amazing it is, which is true. It is amazing. But that's if you really get the black garlic. And one thing that I learned recently that I didn't know is that Kaolic garlic
Uh-huh.
is of that form. So Kaolic's been around for years,
Yeah.
and Kaolic garlic is aged 2 years, and it is black garlic. That's a very reputable brand. And you can Google this and ask AI about like what are the reputable brands for the true black garlic aged. They'll tell you like Kaolic is
Huh. I did not know that either. And that brand's been
hmm
around for I've been in
forever.
the game 20 years and it's been around longer than that. That's
You know.
that's awesome.
So I don't. And by the way, I have no financial vested interests in any of these companies. I wish I did, because they're gonna be taking off, but I don't. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, you
but
know,
this is interesting that you have your options. If you don't want to take the antibiotic and get into the loop,
yeah.
you do have
Yeah.
the option of trying to find these nano products.
I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. I've got another question for you though, because I am of the conspiracy theory department, and I think that certain things are going to keep coming at us. And one of the big questions that folks, ask me is what have I seen as the best immune system support to kind of be antimicrobial in general? I'm super curious what you guys are finding. Are we looking at things like the nano silver, nano copper? And even nano curcumin is kind of one of the things you'd want to consider as a base preventative at this point.
Yeah, I would say so. Definitely, especially because they have zero side effects. The side effects of nano copper, nano silver, nano curcumin are that you somehow feel better or get healthier because of the properties of the product and the fact that there's no toxicity. So I would say that's easily done as a preventative.
Okay. I think this is huge. I think this is huge. Now, we talked about Candida. Candida has
Hmm.
been the bane of my existence for many years, working with it with patients and trying to, you know, eradicate it just in enough time for them to end up with another antibiotic, and here we are again, and doing a lot of cycling in that department. What is your go-to Candida protocol?
First off, I'd recommend everybody read my book, which is the Candida Chronicles. And the go-to protocol is not what it sounds like or what you think. It's more of a procedure.
Hmm.
It's not a magic product. It's the way you approach it. So the first thing you learn, there are certain axioms you'll learn from my book as far as eliminating Candida. One of the first is that we have to follow the 4R approach,
Hmm.
which is interesting because the guys up in Michigan there, I think it was Bridgeport, Michigan, where the Metagetics company did a lot of research. They came up with this approach at the same time I did. In fact, I think it was a little bit after. Basically, what you have to understand with Candida is that it's very genetically slippery, and Candida mutates easily. It mutates in a few different fashions. Like a chameleon, Candida is able to flip itself back and forth. So Candida can exist as a fungus or it can exist as a yeast. It's technically called a dimorphic organism, which means two lives. So Candida can switch itself back and forth from fungus to yeast, fungus to yeast. Candida also genetically can flip to become drug resistant very easily. I knew an oncology surgeon who was dead against treating anybody for Candida because he was afraid it would mutate into a more resistant form. And I explained to him really what I gave him a copy of the book actually, which explains this. And but this is why most treatments fail. Is people take the same medication every day, and then they at the beginning. This is a story we hear on our website. We have a video that dramatizes this. But the story is the person was being treated for Candida with nystatin or something, and they felt amazing for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then they stopped improving, and then a few weeks later, it started to come back. So the doctor increased the dose higher, and that made it worse. Came back then even stronger. So Candida mutates after 21 days of being exposed to the same antifungal, whether it's a pharmaceutical or an herb, whatever, as long as the substance has a pharmaceutical action or a chemotherapeutic action against the Candida, it mutates in 21 days. It starts to. The mother cells start to tell the daughter cells what to do not to be killed by this drug.
Wow.
So when you have a Candida protocol that you're giving the person that they're taking the things every day, you're doomed. That's what's going to happen. Originally, in my office, when I was on Fulton Street in Manhattan, we had a little laboratory there, and we would take people's stool samples and we would incubate them to see which strain of Candida they had. And what was fascinating is all the people that came in who were referred by like Dr. Hoffman or Dr. Atkins or whoever in Manhattan who had Candida, who were being treated for Candida unsuccessfully, all of those people had Candida glabrata or Candida tropicalis. Candida tropicalis was the main species we saw. The people who came to me for other problems who didn't know what Candida was all had Candida albicans. So here's the sort of the mini proof that they were all these strains of Candida were flipping genetically. So the first thing you have to learn is that you have to rotate the antifungals that you use. We switch them around every 4 days. We typically pick on our first phase of Candida elimination. We pick 4 antifungals. We rotate them 4 days each until we have the indicators they're finished with that phase. Our program starts out though with phase 0. And phase 0 is a group of products that I formulated which mechanically start to eliminate the surface layers of Candida. And the longer you're on phase 0, the deeper it goes into your mucosa to eliminate the layers of Candida and protozoa and bad bacteria and stuff. We have the person do that for a month to set them up, because if you dive right into the first phase, you could get a lot of Herx reactions. We find that these products are also formulated to reduce Herx. So the person does that for a month, that sets them up, it gets a good foundation. Then they go on phase 1 where they rotate the herbs that kill the Candida systemically. They do that until we have the indications from the testing that we do that they're finished with that. Then they go to phase 2. And on phase 2, we use different antifungals that kill the Candida more deeper in your mucosa. We use things like caprylic acid, undesolenic acid, monolaurin, butyrate, because these are all fatty acid antifungals that are able to really permeate your deep intestinal tract in order to get rid of the roots of the Candida, if you want to look at it that way. All the other herbs can kill the Candida very nicely, but the problem is they can't go really deep like the fatty acids can, because the fatty acids naturally can enter the cell as a nutrient almost. And because of their antifungal properties, they can then really kill the Candida. So when that phase is over, now we have a choice. If the person has leaky gut, we have to handle the leaky gut. If they don't have leaky gut, we can start replacing their flora. So this goes back now to, we're stretching the 4 R's a little bit. It's remove and now repair.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to be replace. So after we repair the gut, we then give them the probiotics. If you try giving somebody with leaky gut probiotics, you're going to have a hot time in the old town tonight, because all that flora is going to go into their bloodstream. They're going to go autoimmune. They typically will have bad reactions. That's a sign of somebody who has leaky gut, is somebody who can't tolerate probiotics. And it's because they have leaky gut. So you have to handle the leaky gut, and there's many products out there that can do that, but you have to test them. You cannot listen to the patient. The patient is going to tell you, I've heard this story a million times. They have the worst leaky gut you have ever heard of in your whole career. They've been treating leaky gut for 10 years and it's never gotten better. And often when you test these people, you find out they don't have leaky gut. They're just confusing mast cell activation and cytokines that they have from the massive candida and dysbiosis they have. They're confusing that with leaky gut. So when you do a zonulin protein test on the person, if they have leaky gut, then you put them on the various products that all the companies offer, and you do that until you get a negative on the zonulin. Now you can put them on the probiotics, and when you do that, when you put them on the probiotics, you have to make sure that you put them on an array of prebiotics too. They need to take FOS, they need to take inulin, they need to take a proper fiber for the probiotics to feed on, and blah blah blah. Now, initially, when they do that, they're going to get gas and bloating. And then about a month later, the gas and bloating will really improve. And that's a good sign that the probiotics have settled in and they're cool. So now the first thing you want to do is you want to test this person for toxicity. You want to do something like the tox detect from Mosaic. You want to do a hair analysis to look for copper, iron, arsenic, mercury. You want to look for toxicity that could cause this candida to return.
Okay, so big toxicity connection.
Is going to make it, and you also want to look for deficiencies, like if they're deficient in magnesium and zinc and selenium and copper. Those are things that could also make it easier to develop candida. An interesting thing on a hair test is if you find very low cobalt and very low iron and low copper, that often could be an indication that they have candida. And if you find high mercury and copper, that could be an indication they have candida. But that's not something I would go by. You have to go by an actual test. So that then people ask me usually, what's the best test? Well, stool tests. I've just recently in my second book, I'm writing a chapter about how inaccurate stool tests are, unless you really know what to look at, and then it's only suggestive. It's an inference, and in engineering it would be called an inference test. It means to infer. So if you get a stool test of GI map on somebody, let's say, and they don't have any lactobacillus, they don't have any bifidus, right? Let's say their fatty acids, essential fatty acids are very low. Their butyrate's low. If they do a stool pH and the stool pH is above 7.4, let's say it's 7.6, 7.7, if they have other pathogens like Klebsiella, Citrobacter, Staph aureus, Pseudomonas, if they have really bad flora, very good chance this person has candida. Yeah. That we're talking about here. This stool profile, very good chance. But does it show in the stool? No. If you use doctor's data, a stool test from doctor's data, they almost always on all their tests do a microscopy study, and they'll tell you if they find yeast. So they can find none to many. Now, if they find yeast, but they don't culture any, that's the same thing. You see, finding yeast cells that are dead means they were once alive, and that means that this person has a yeast overgrowth. So that's from a stool test you can take. But other than that, if you don't do a microscopic study of yeast, you don't know, because the culture is going to show negative most of the time. You continually will get false negatives on a stool test, and here is why. Candida doesn't grow in your intestinal tract in a uniform manner the way bacteria does. Bacteria grows in your intestinal tract like moss going up a building. It covers it nicely. Candida grows in spotty blotches. So if you could get a flashlight and walk through the intestinal tract, you would see, nice flora, everything here, and then all of a sudden you'd come to this glob of biofilm that has protozoa in it and yeast growing and bacteria, and it's all coated with biofilm. You see this for a few feet, and then you continue walking, and now it's clear again. And you walk another few feet, and then you're going to come up to another one of these blobs. That's how Candida grows. It also will tend to grow in your flexures, hepatic flexure and the splenic flexure. So it can grow there, and parasites can get in there, and it can be in the region of worms, which is your transverse colon. So it has its spots that it grows in, but the bottom line is it doesn't grow in a uniform manner. And because of that, there's no guarantee that that stool sample you pick up that day is going to have contact long enough with the colonies of Candida to then be replicable. That's
That
what the
makes
bottom line is.
it makes sense. I have long
So what you
wondered
have to
about that.
do about that, yeah, that's why. That's why. So you have to look at the profile. Does this person's stool test fit the profile? And the profile is a lack of friendly bacteria, including E. coli. You're gram positive and gram negative. So you have gram negative E. coli, which represents maybe half the person's flora or more. So you've had gram negative E. coli, gram positive bifidus and lactobacillus acidophilus, and then you have the pH, and you have the fatty acids. So you have this whole profile. So if they fit that profile, it's probably 90% that they have candida. How could a person not develop candida when they don't have friendly flora? But how you know for sure is very simple. If you combine your stool test, this is what I tend to do. Combine the stool test with an oats test,
Hmm.
and you then look at the arabinose. So if the person has positive arabinose and they have a stool profile like this, then that's all you need. In court, you'd have no argument. And so
Oh.
then you can proceed. Now, I'm lucky. I developed a urine test, which is unique to my practice many years ago. This is going on probably 40 years already. We have a urine test which has three primary things we look at. We look at free radicals in the urine that are alcohol driven. That's known as the oxidata test, which you can buy commercially. We look at their indican, urinary indican, and we have a reagent that was developed a long time ago by a doctor I know. And this reagent will react to parasite wastes and candida wastes. And when you put urine in a test tube and you add this reagent, the urine suddenly becomes solid. It'll become like curdled.
Wow.
And there are different degrees of curdling depending on how bad this is. So we have this urine test at our beck and call that we can do on the patient at any time. In fact, we have patients do it at home all the time to measure their progress. So we don't have to repeat the stool test and the oats test all the time. We do that in the beginning to get a firm clarification. And then as they're going through the program, we have them do this urine test so we can monitor what's happening. And that's how we know. When I was saying before about moving them from one phase to the next, that's how we know. We can move them from this phase now to the next one, because from doing this for so long and using this urine test for so long, there are certain changes that we see after each phase is over. Certain things are going to shift and move, and so we know, and that's how we're able to move them. But I think the moral of the story is you've got to be able to test the person to know for sure what you're doing, because if you can get, in some cases, other organisms which could mimic candida, and you can also have to remember that when you have candida, the mess that your biome is in to support candida will easily then support other organisms. So this is why I like to use the word dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is the correct term. The definition of dysbiosis is that you have an imbalance between the sum aggregate of all the good organisms, the good friendly flora, and the bad ones. So the bad actors have all taken over. And those actors, it could be many different ones. Like we very typically see in a chronic candida patient, H. pylori, which is one of the worst combinations you could have. If you go online and you Google this, H. pylori and candida together are very bad. They have some kind of weird synergy. I noticed this back in the 90s. I had no way, I couldn't explain it. All I knew was it was harder to get rid of candida on the people who had H. pylori. Now there are studies coming out from the universities that are actually clarifying why that is.
Mm.
But you're going to find, bottom line is if the person's flora is in bad shape, they're going to have dysbiosis. They're going to have multiple bad guys. So you have to use things that are going to be able to kill not just yeast, but you have to kill some of these bacteria. So, and part of my new book is going to be showing people how you take a stool test. You look at the bacteria that are there, the dysbiotic pathogens, and you select what herbs you can select that are going to be more effective against those bacteria that are also antifungal.
Hmm.
So if you have somebody, let's say, who has Candida and Klebsiella, you're gonna look on a chart for what herbs also kill Klebsiella, and then you use those herbs in your protocol against the Candida. And that's one of the ways you want to select what you're going to take, is by what is the other flora doing. So some people have very complex flora. We have a patient recently who had Staph aureus, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, Citrobacter frondi, a whole host of bad microbes. And it took a little bit of time to find herbal products that would kill all those bacteria and the candida. But that's the way you need to look at it. Because if you don't kill the bacterial pathogens, they'll continue to imbalance your flora. Or let's say bacteria like Klebsiella will prevent your friendly bacteria from coming back. So that's going to allow the candida to come back. You see? So you've got to kill them all, and in doing that, this is the best way to do it: is look at what bacteria they have, select products that are antifungal that will also kill those bacteria.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense to have that, two-prong, maybe three if we think of it in terms of a holistic type of approach to really go after stuff. Wow. Wow. So many things. And, right now I feel like almost every patient that's walking into my office is showing signs of some sort of candida or MCAS. Histamines are all over the place. Granted, I see a lot of women who are in the hormone space in terms of perimenopause, menopause, but I feel like there is some switch connected to hormones too, and candida.
We know that candida is very estrogenic. Candida sensitizes your estrogen receptors. It itself is an estrogenic organism. Estrogen makes it grow, and it sensitizes your body to the effects of estrogen. We know that about candida.
Wow.
So that's a no-brainer right there.
Wow. And in terms of men on testosterone and back conversion of estrogens going very high, what have you seen in that case of working on candida in the body? Obviously testing, but if they do have it.
Yeah, it's an aromatase issue where they're converting the testosterone into estrogen, and it's much easier for them to do that if they have candida. So it becomes a double-edged sword. If a man has estrogen, he can develop candida. And if a man has candida, he can develop excess estrogen. It goes both ways. So you just have to handle it. You have to get that under control.
Wow.
But there are a lot of, in my book, all of this is in my book because there's so much regarding this.
Yeah.
And then as far as these basic rules I was talking about before, like you don't try to handle leaky gut until you first have disinfected to some degree the candida. You don't give the person probiotics until you handle the leaky gut. If you try to give somebody probiotics who has active dysbiosis, that they don't stick. It's a waste of time. If you give the person a lot of vitamins, you'll make them worse. There are certain vitamins that worsen candida. There are other vitamins which will stop the antifungals from working, which is generally most antioxidants, because most antifungals, whether they're prescription or herbal, are technically classified as chemotherapeutic. So anything that's chemotherapeutic, antioxidants stop, because the whole purpose is to produce free radical damage to the membrane of the organism. This is how, like regular chemotherapy for cancer, it works by creating free radical damage on the cancer membrane. And that is true of just all chemotherapy. And the same thing is true with a lot of antiparasitics and antifungals. They're trying to create free radical damage on the candida membrane to kill it. The problem is vitamin D really strengthens candida. There are certain drugs that actually work to kill the candida by interrupting the candida's ability to absorb vitamin D. Nystatin interrupts the candida's ability to absorb iron. You see? So if you're giving your candida patient iron and vitamin D while you're treating them, well, the candida is very happy with you, but it's not really going to go anywhere at that point because you're feeding it. And the same thing would be true with the antioxidants. So you have to know all the tricks. This is why it's hard to get rid of candida, is because there's just so many tricks. And unless you know them all, you're giving the candida an edge. But once you know all the tricks and you can totally control the environment, then you can get rid of the candida. It's actually not that hard. You just have to know all the tricks and have everything in place.
And of course, I've had people come into me who've been trying to eradicate a candida in their body for decades. And so hearing you say, like, it's not that hard, I'm going, okay, we've got your book. We can start there. I'm sure folks are probably also going like, the urine test. That would be useful to know what's going on. How, on average, because I know we have all kinds of different folks with different kind of things going on average, a moderate case of Candida that's probably been around for a long time, how long would someone be treating themselves? How long on average would it take?
9 months to a year.
Okay. Yeah, not decades.
Phase 0, they'd want to do phase 0 for a month. Phase 1 usually is 2 months. Phase 2 is usually 2 months. Handling leaky gut could be 3. And getting your probiotics back in is at least, there's an initial month where there's a lot of activity acutely in getting the probiotics to replicate, but then after that, you need a maintenance of about 3 months to make sure they're back. So when you add it all up, I'd say when you add it all up and you throw in the person's going to go on vacation, they're going to have weddings, they're going to have this and that, you're probably looking at a year.
That's not bad compared to a lot of what I've seen, decades of dealing with it.
Yep.
So when is your new book coming out?
It shouldn't take, probably next year.
Okay.
It's probably going to be next year. Because it's interesting. We're trying to cover things that weren't covered in the first book, and particularly this methodology of how you interpret the stool test, because this is something people need to know. Doctors need to know this, because so many doctors look at a stool test and they say, no, you don't have Candida, and that's the end of the story, which is hysterical. But if you were to people need to get in the habit of doing the stool test to understand the biome and doing something else to identify Candida, whether it's going to be dark field testing, whether it's going to be the oats test, whether it's even going to be antibody testing. Years ago, we had the Candisphere test, which was a blood test that looked at all the Candida antibodies and it looked at the cytotoxic proteins the Candida would release. That was a great test. I think it exists somewhere under a different name right now. But the problem with that test is that for 9 months after you eliminate the Candida, the test still shows positive on the person because of the antibodies remaining elevated. It's like Epstein-Barr virus. You get a person who tests for Epstein-Barr, and the IgG is going to be elevated indefinitely. And this is another one of my something I find very annoying in the field is that people don't know how to interpret an Epstein-Barr blood test. So you have basically 2 antibodies you're worried about, IgG and IgM. So IgG is the antibody which will remain elevated when you have Epstein-Barr. When you've had Epstein-Barr, your IgG is going to elevate it. It's going to stay elevated. IgM is the one that tells you have a present infection. So when a doctor looks at an Epstein-Barr test and he sees IgG positive and he goes, "Oh, you have Epstein-Barr," he has to say, "Oh, you had Epstein-Barr." Now, if you're following the person's IgG and you at some point in time get it increased by about 4 times, it's reactivating. And then shortly after that, you'll see the IgM then go positive again. That's how you interpret an Epstein-Barr test. You don't say you have Epstein-Barr because your IgG is elevated. That's not true. It's telling you past infection, but it will increase probably 4-fold if the Epstein-Barr starts to reactivate. But then at the same time, you're going to get the IgM go positive. So that's how you're going to know.
Yeah. Very important distinguishing factor. And I think a lot of patients will have the test on and come to me and also have that same kind of question. So
do they say the same thing to you? I have Epstein-Barr. Look at my IgG.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of confusion between reactivated and old. Just you had it, and some
right.
years.
Now that's the problem with the Candisphere test, is that for about 9 months it's still going to show positive. I mean, the antibodies hopefully slowly reduce in people, but it's different for everybody. But definitely, it's not a test, a real-time test like a Rabinose would be, or any of the organic acids. The organic acids are being produced from the organism being there, and when the organism is not there, they're not there.
Yeah, I love the organic acids test for this at this point because I've kind of gotten away a little bit from the stool testing, but now you're kind of making sense, like with the Klebsiella, and I'm going, yeah, that fits the bill of what I've seen and been like, there's no Candida showing up. But yes, I think it because of exactly what you're saying, low lacto.
Yeah, it's the profile. So I'm working right now on a organic acid test for parasites, for protozoa and worms, and I'm trying to get Mosaic Labs interested in putting this test through a trial. So if anybody out there, if you can do me a favor, call Mosaic Labs and ask them, do you have Dr. Biamonte's organic acid parasite test yet? They'll say, no, no, we don't. And then they'll probably go back to the people over there in tech and say, gee, we're getting calls about this. Maybe we should speed up looking into this.
I
But
would
this
love
would
that.
be awesome if they would do this test. Yeah, I would too. I would love to have it too. So that the panel will have specific organic acids which are found to be elevated with parasites, and that's a much better go than anything else we have right now, because that's probably the slipperiest thing to look for. Years ago, we had Dr. Cahill, Dr. What was the other? Dr. Bueno in Manhattan, and there was one other fellow, and passed away. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. But we had at least three doctors who did the rectal swab test, which is
Mm,
probably the most accurate test you can do for parasites. This is where the person goes right to the doctor's office. The doctor takes a mucosal swab of their rectum and puts it under the microscope right then and there. And he looks to see what they've got going on. And that's the most accurate test for parasites that exists. The secondary tests to that would be like looking at your uric acid level in your blood, or some other things, or my organic acid test if it ever gets off the ground. That would be secondary. But as far as actually looking for it, that would be the best way to go. But all those fellows are gone. They're not around anymore.
man, that is hard. That is hard. Yeah, it's testing is tricky, and I'm glad that you're diving into it and seeing what you can do. I definitely am curious about the urine test that you have, and so folks can order it on your website. They can get a hold of it,
No,
or they need to be in a
no, no,
program
no,
with
no.
you.
Yeah, no, we don't give the urine test. We tried that once, and it was a disaster because we had people calling, jamming our phone lines all day, asking about interpretation of the test. They
Oh,
weren't sure how to interpret it. Even though it comes with full color diagrams and everything, they still weren't sure, and they were jamming our phone lines up. So really, really, we only use the test on people who are actual patients on our program.
gotcha. Well, I think folks right now are probably like, Dr. Biamonte, let's talk about how they can work with you, how they can get more information, where they can find you. Let's share all of
Only
that.
they can find me on Facebook. They can find me on Instagram. They can find me on the web. If you go to my website, which is health-truth.com, you can also find me at the New York City Candida Doctor website and the New York City Thyroid Doctor, which is kind of crazy because I'm not in New York City anymore, but the websites do remain. And the reason why I have a thyroid website is interesting. It's because there's such a relationship between Candida and thyroid that I had to actually start a website devoted to that.
I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just something I've observed, but I have noticed that one, thyroid conditions are tricky to treat, and wax and wane may be wax and wane of Candida and what it's doing. Is that what have I been thinking this
Yeah,
thought?
Candida and Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's and Candida are the major connection. So we have that, and then there's a lot of good information out there on the internet, that people can look up, especially on Instagram.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that's where they can find me,
Good deal. And
and
your
we'd be
book that
happy to give information to anyone.
perfect.
Well, my
Perfect.
book is on Amazon, like everything else is. It's the Candida Chronicles. They can find it there on Amazon. And next year, the second book, the companion book, which is more of a how to do it. Like the first book is more the theory of everything going on, and it's the first book does have some how to do it, but the second book is going to be devoted in how you do it.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Mm.
Well, thank you so much for putting in the hard work and figuring this stuff out, and definitely giving some insight on the Cyclospora situation too for us, because I think a lot of folks are really worried. and wanting to have something they can do for backup. So I sincerely appreciate that. And thank you so much for all your information. We're going to put everything down below in the podcast notes there at drjkrauseND.com. But also, if you're watching on YouTube, it's going to be down below there as well. Dr. Biamonte, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.